Hello, anybody who's watching this, welcome to my reaction to false advertising Scott The Woz. Um, I've never seen a video from Scott The Woz. This is my first time watching anything. The first time I've ever heard his name is when JonTron went on a long hiatus. Then when he came back, he said that his Reddit was overtaken by somebody named Scott The Woz. And I think he said that sounds like a disease, something like that. That's the first time I've ever heard his name. A great introduction to his channel. And I chose false advertising because I hate it. I hate false advertising, and I want to hear somebody else talk about it in the same manner. By same manner, I mean just hating on it, because it's a shitty practice. And stop. As long as people buy things that have false advertising, people will keep doing false advertising. It's whatever. Anyway, if you want to help out the channel, there's the donation link in the description below. You can also recommend a video through that, and you can recommend a video through comment section below. Also subscribe for more low energy, low quality, low effort content. Anyway, let's begin.
Hey y'all, Scott here. Please, for the love of God, don't mind me. I'm just doing some touch-ups to my high school yearbook photo. You think they'd let me do retakes 9 years later? There's gotta be a grace period. I've been having trouble going to sleep thinking about what people thought of me back then, so hopefully this will change their minds.
Let's see, have that Sega.
And we're done! I actually toned it down, I didn't want to get too laid. Telling the truth. What are you, a bitch? Well, be honest about how your video game looks when you can just lie and deal with it when it's already bought. False advertising is how many companies roll. We've all seen those fast food comparison shots.
Yeah.
This is what's advertised, and this is what I got. What the hell? Most of the time for marketing, they'll use something that represents the final product, but you do some color correction, adjust the lighting, tweak a few angles here and there, boom, good enough for air. And when it comes to video games, they are no stranger to catfishing. Why show actual gameplay in your ad when you can show something that's neither a game nor being played? That's way easier to disappoint players than to entice them with the truth. No matter what, false advertising is always gonna stick with gaming. It's been there since the very start, and it'll be there till the very end in 4 months. Advertisers know they could just show you what the actual game is gonna be like, or they could visualize what it'll feel like. Garbage. Sometimes advertisements don't necessarily lie, but with the way they're set up, you come in with certain expectations. With the Mario Galaxy commercials and box art, I thought you could fly through space just like this to each of the galaxies. Instead, they just play a cutscene of Mario flying, and when you would fly in game, it would mostly just be an automated thing going from one place to another. You did get a power-up late in the game, the Red Star, and that let you freely fly for a decent amount of time, but it was only in one level in the hub world.
But is it a false advertisement if it didn't actually say that you can freely fly through space? It just showed you that you can, and you technically can.
I wanted to cream through space to all these levels like how this looked. And Super Mario Galaxy just ended up being my favorite game of all time. I'll take the single tier. This is kind of the mentality of a lot of old school box art. Box art in general is supposed to be an artistic representation of the game you're buying. Of course it shouldn't lie, but if you're waiting for an exact moment in the game to look just like the box art, well, that's a toughie. I don't think this ever happened until...
Well, the thing is that box art comes from a long time ago when games didn't look good at all. Now you can put like an art of a game onto the box art and you will see the similar situation and there, like Horizon Zero Dawn was shown. You play as Aloy, as a red-headed woman with a bow, and there's a giant robot thing that actually happens in the game. With this, it's like, what are they gonna show you? Just a screenshot of Space Invaders? And that's it? Like, they needed to entice you somehow. So I understand that. But yes, this would, unlike the first point, this about Mario Galaxy, this would fall into false advertising in my mind.
Title legends. Obviously, these take and hyperbolize the best and most defining moments of the game to make for a great and appealing piece of art that also isn't misleading, which is a difficult thing to balance. Atari thought we were idiots. This isn't misleading because under the right mindset, the game will make you feel like this. Soul eating soap? You thought we were past this level of deception? Oh, no. See, many have noticed how box art has become more in line with what we expect out of our games these days, but the angst behind the Atari box art lives on in the form of trailers. We could show the product and get people excited, or we could not show the product and get people excited and pissed eventually. Hey, sometimes you just have to show something. And if that something isn't enough, America's biggest fear becomes a reality. The gamers will revolt. So it's obviously enticing to make your game look as appealing as possible in your big reveal trailer. It's okay to use a few scenes not actually in the game, maybe put...
That's why I actually don't get hyped for this kind of trailers. I get more hype of a trailer that actually says actual gameplay footage. Even if it's gonna be a lie in the end, like the lowered graphics and stuff like that, at least some parts of that would be true, unlike just a cinematic, which could not. There's a chance that it's not gonna happen in the game at all.
Put some CGI there for the sake of
Yeah,
cinema.
again, just me.
Maybe put that in. It's not in the game, but we can make it happen in the game, right? This is how legends are born.
Yeah,
Dead
Dead Island
is one
has
of
a
my
weird
go-to
one.
picks for deceiving trailers, and it's one of the best ones of all time. This incredible, emotional, 3-minute-long cinematic masterpiece.
Yeah.
A family being attacked and losing their lives to a zombie outbreak, all played in reverse.
And
So much
killing
you
a
can
child,
analyze with
that's
this
rare.
trailer. It put Dead Island on the map for so many players. This trailer was the first time I had even heard of the game. It really set the title up to be a gripping, emotional story of a zombie apocalypse and the emotional turmoil that ensued.
But then there was just meh.
Here's the first thing you see putting the disc in.
Shrunken head, broken legs, body parts on the concrete.
Not saying Dead Island is
Let's
a
talk
bad
racing
game at
for a
all, but the
second.
trailer and the game are two completely different beasts. The tone of the game is still fairly serious, but not as serious or emotionally gripping as the trailer would lead you to believe. These characters have nothing to do with the game, other than showing remnants of the outbreak as it first occurred on the island. The developer Techland even went into the game after the trailer came out to try to adjust the tone as much as possible to be more in line with it. But these still feel like two different things. It just shows how powerful marketing can be, making you want something you had no prior interest in. But this was a case of false advertising just because we let somebody talented make our trailer. Oops. Sometimes false advertising is very much deliberate as it sets you up for a massive shock while playing the game. Metal Gear Solid 2 is a prime example, as you think you'll just play as Snake the whole game. Nah, you're playing the rest of the game as this new character, Raiden. Final Fantasy VII Remake. Well, with the title literally involving the word remake, it sets you up to expect the story to basically follow the same steps as the original. Also, the entirety of the original. On reality, this was a fucking lie. The Last of Us Part 2 on top of...
It is a remake, but the way they made it, it's... Nah, I don't think I will ever buy it and play it at all. It's not interesting to me the way it's made.
In the same Metal Gear Solid joke of, you thought you were playing as this character? Laugh. They also altered certain cutscenes for its trailers to make the character Joel look older in them, so that way, with viewers knowing he's aged, they were led to believe he was in more of the game than he really was, when in reality, they altered flashback scenes, made him look older, and put them in the trailer. See, I don't really consider that to be false advertising, at least in the more negative sense. Rather, it's leading players in another direction, or just not showing things to avoid spoilers. So it's just being an ass. But then
Yeah, it's kind of just hiding. Usually, like Marvel does it with movies where they hide twists. And I don't think it's a false advertisement. I think it's just to make you surprised when it happens. But if the trailer would show me a lot of gameplay from one character and maybe some gameplay from the second character, or even no gameplay from the second character, but in the actual game there is a lot of gameplay of the second character, but none or very little of the first one, that would be false advertising, and I would riot. A single-man riot.
We have just the flat-out lies. Some of the most despicable, loathsome moments in the video game industry. The Simpsons game. This game had the audacity to say in its E3 2007 trailer it was releasing on every platform ever made.
Jesus Christ.
Coming this fall to every platform ever made.
Oh, even the PSP? See, most people would assume that's a joke, but you forget to take into consideration most people. Some people genuinely thought people would assume that's a joke, but you forget to take into consideration most people.
Vision. Oh shit.
Some people genuinely thought this game was coming to all these platforms, so we had to re-release the trailer. The voiceover was the same, but the platforms showcased were... true. Well, I said it was ridiculous for anybody to assume the original trailer wasn't a joke. I think some of the platform choices were incredibly misleading. The Game Boy Advance and GameCube were still being supported at this time, so out of all platforms to put there as a joke, those are really odd choices considering I don't think it was too far-fetched to expect a Game Boy Advance or GameCube version in 2007. Or the VIC-20. The box itself can be pretty deceitful sometimes. The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild on Wii U says it supports the Wii Remote and Nunchuck and Classic Controller and lying. This was just a misprint, but there was speculation in the early days of Breath of the Wild's development that it would allow players to use motion controls like with Skyward Sword on the Wii. Now, supporting one Wii Remote by itself, I think only the bravest.
No, I've seen how Game Grumps played Skyward Sword with motion controls. Nah, I don't think people would love that.
Speculated that. Doom on Sega Saturn says on the box that it's the original Doom in all of its glory when it's missing content. But then we have the flat-out disappointments, where you watch a Fruit Gushers commercial as a kid, and in those, whenever somebody ate one, their entire head would turn into a giant fruit, so you never ate one for years out of fear, and one day you decided life is hell anyways. Son of a bitch. Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite. Oh, this collector's edition comes with stones.
Oh yeah.
God, if they're just eggs.
Yeah.
These have all been somewhat tolerable lies, though. I mean, if she's cheating on you, at least she's only doing it a little. Aliens Colonial Marines was...
No, if it's a false advertising with a collector's edition, that's fucking low. That's a low blow to do. God damn.
Such a massive cluster of garbage. Like, what the hell happened here? Gameplay demos shown were severely different from the final product, making the game look so much more
Well, that's always
sophisticated
the thing.
with lighting, AI, animations, a severe attention to detail. But upon release, we only have a few options here. See, this was a massive downgrade, some areas of the game more so than others. But in the end, this was pure deceptive marketing. At E3 2012, the game was running on very specific work machines. This wasn't going to work on the consoles at the time, but...
They usually make for the demo a very short amount of gameplay, like just one level out of everything, like out of open world, especially with like, I think that's what happened to Watch Dogs, is when you actually added, no, if it looks way too good, it's not gonna be running well on anything, and that's a problem. So it doesn't hurt me if the game looks worse. If the gameplay in the trailer looks good and not literally looks like plays well, looks enjoyable to play, and then when you in the actual game it's the same thing but with worse graphics, I'm fine with that. I don't care about graphics. My number one thing, graphics goes last. Number one thing is the gameplay loop and then the story. All that stuff, it's so much more important than just graphics. I don't really give a shit.
Still not work. While it's not unplayable, Colonial Marines was a huge disappointment and showcases how companies will pretty up a game for major games.
Colonial Marines, yeah, it was
end up releasing something not nearly as groundbreaking. It's crazy how far these studios will go to mask a title's true identity, which, to be fair, I'm sure they wanted Aliens to end up looking like this. The intention definitely wasn't to win everybody over at E3 and then release shit. These gameplay demos are supposed to represent what they want the game to be, and if it actually turns out that way, well, let's pray God's a fan. I mean, this demo looks like a fine-tuned PS4 Xbox One game, not a 360 title. But even then, the
also, depending on when the trailer is released, in comparison to the actual release date of the game, the more time in between, the more different it's gonna look. That's why there are games who had their trailers out for years, and then every next trailer looks different. Sometimes even just worse every trailer. Just because it's changes, they make it work. They're optimizing the way they can. So it's not too bad.
Graphical downgrade isn't merely due to the consoles. It affected the PC version as well, and overall, everything was just lower quality. It tricked millions into buying the game, thinking it would be this, when in reality, it was nothing but a shell of that. Watch Dogs suffered a similar, though not a severe fate, where it too looked light years better via the gameplay demo than in its final state. This was definitely because it was revealed quite early in the project's life.
Yes, exactly.
They didn't have to take hardware limitations into account nearly as much at this time compared to when you're finalizing everything about the game. And when it got to that point, I mean, the game still looks fine, but that E3 gameplay demo was beyond impressive. Watch Dogs at release was a somewhat buggy, generic, modern Ubisoft game, and not much more than that. No Man's Sky was...
I never was able to finish it, but I played it. I think I tried to finish it twice. Played just a little bit, but I do enjoy the hacking people, get their money and all that stuff. That's a fun mechanic for me.
Let down for many,
Yeah.
but the promise of
Nobody
basically
cares.
having an infinite amount of worlds to travel to in space.
Yeah, that was a
The
thing.
ones they decided to showcase at E3 were the only ones of note. The game was supposed to feature procedurally generated worlds, and when you would land on one, it was truly you discovering it. But in reality, the game launched as a boring experience where there was nothing to do, and the worlds weren't impressive. They didn't look as graphically decent as
I
they
want to
did
hear
during
what
the
he's gonna
marketing
say
push.
to
They all
Leon.
just felt like variations of each other, nothing of note. Now Watch Dogs wasn't the
Okay. If you wanna see the video, Internet Historian has a great video about No Man's Sky and what happened to it. Just a fantastic video. It changed my mind about the game, and I even played it after I watched that video. But the problem was people started every time the main guy came to an interview. He was asked questions as everybody wants to know what you can do in the game, and he would say something that was in the game at the time, but then because of time limitations, because I think Sony was a publisher, and then they limited their they couldn't let them just make it for years and years. They just said it's gonna come out here, and then they were able to ask them for like a month later, but still it has to come out there, so they cut a fuck ton of content out of it. Which is sad, but it did come back. They added content back, added content they never talked about. There were a lot of things. So watch, if you haven't, whoever watching this, watch Internet Historian's No Man's Sky video. It's fucking amazing.
biggest downgrade. It was still a decent game, and No Man's Sky got a ton of updates, and at this point,
Yes.
it's pretty okay and does a better job living up to what was initially promised. Aliens was one of the worst cases of this, deliberately making a better looking gameplay demo before releasing. Gameplay demos are supposed to be more trustworthy than trailers. That's the point of them.
Yeah.
Trailers use CG cutscenes and cuts between them in gameplay all the time. The gameplay demo is supposed to show you what you're gonna get, because trailers can be incredibly misleading. The Killzone 2
Again,
trailer infamously
Even gameplay trailer, it's shown something, and then in the game, something is different. Depending on what's different, I will react differently. If it's just the lower graphics, fine. I didn't expect to have a hyper realistic world. What the fuck am I talking about? Photorealistic. I didn't expect photorealistic graphics. It's whatever. It doesn't matter to me. But if it's entirely two different beasts, like you can't do anything that was shown in the trailer, I don't know, in a gameplay trailer, then yeah, then fuck that company.
CGI, even though it was animated in a way to make the viewer
At least unless
think it was
it's
all gameplay.
changes like
This
No
was
Man's
right
Sky.
before the PlayStation 3 was coming out, and that was a time when we thought anything was possible on these consoles. If anybody could resurrect Christ, it would be the PS3. So many assumed they weren't lying. This was gameplay. Now, Killzone 2
it's the
still
first
looked
Killzone,
quite
okay.
good when it released, but the people who made this
Never
trailer,
played any.
they're still going to hell. Tiger Woods PGA Tour 2009 on Wii. The commercial used Xbox 360 footage of the game with a Wii Remote pointer. How did they think that would fly? EA explained the Wii footage wouldn't look good on a TV, so they used the HD footage from the 360 version and put the Wii Remote pointer in there, and bam, that's a sin. But the game
Oh,
decided to do something innovative.
that sucks.
Biggest example of false advertising
Fallout
of
76.
all time.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not really saying anything
Oh.
that hasn't already been said here.
This one.
Smallpox. They fucking stink. But when talking about false advertising in gaming, we can't avoid the piss stain on my Xbox collection. Cyberpunk 2077 was developed by CD Projekt Red, a developer highly regarded for their work on the Witcher series and their commitment to consumer-friendly practices.
Okay, I'm gonna say that maybe they'll put systems they cut back into them for Cyberpunk. I don't know. Hopefully, and we'll have similar to No Man's Sky story where they came back and they're just kept working on the thing. Maybe. To be honest, hopefully. Because CD Projekt Red that are, at least were, a good company, so that's very, very sad. At least they were updating people when they like were cutting the systems because they couldn't make them work. They were talking about it, unlike No Man's Sky, where it just people expected everything to be in it, whatever was said on every fucking interview ever, and then when it came out with nothing.
I mean, The Witcher 3 was a huge hit, but even before that release, they announced they'd be working on a game based on the Cyberpunk series of tabletop RPGs. This was in 1964. Announced in 2012, then getting its first trailer in 2013, and then its next trailer 5 years later. In reality, the game was nowhere near starting full-on development, and it took until The Witcher 3's final expansion released in 2016 for the team to actually start work, and when this gameplay demo was fully revealed in 2018,
that's kind of a first red
jaws
flag.
dropped. This was such a detailed world with people walking around who have legitimate lives
Doesn't
to live.
represent the final look of the
Follow just
game.
one around, you would see them go about their
Means,
day, go to their job, go home,
fuck
and
it.
every single decision of yours would
Nothing
come
gonna
back
be like
to
this.
bite you in the ass. And this is all without saying, the game looked stunning. Just absolutely beautiful models and settings. The animations were amazing. It looked like the most advanced video game of all time. And guess what? After being delayed numerous times, Cyberpunk launched in a state that, well, the main issue stemmed from the console versions. The PC version looked, ran, and worked the best, but it still was a far cry from that initial gameplay reveal.
Like, it's a buggy mess, but bugs can be fixed. And judging by the updates, I think they are being fixed at the moment. With the Scott systems, it's a different story. They might not even try to add them back because they weren't able to do so in the first place, so why would they try again? Who knows? But bugs are fixable. Bugs aren't that a big deal. Bugs and like optimization problems, that's okay.
Most of the issues boiled down to how glitchy and unpolished the game could be at times, but at its core, I'll stand by the fact it's a good game. The world is really what sells it. It's
what I've
detailed and
seen.
feels like a genuine lived-in place, and being in a dystopian future, it's truly a world worth exploring and looking at every little minute thing. But everything around it just doesn't feel all too special. The gameplay isn't anything groundbreaking. It's a first-person open-world RPG involving shooting and driving segments, and none of this is bad, but it just isn't anything I haven't seen before. Anything that they talked about in the gameplay demo, like how advanced and unplayable characters are, you just see them walking in a circle, going up to them and hitting the talk button, and they say one of like 3 repeated phrases to you. The same goes for the characters more integral to the story.
Yeah, like, why adding things like that? Like, if you're not gonna add a lot of dialogue to random characters, just don't add an interactive button. That you're kind of digging your own grave while doing so. Also, instead of making them walk in circles, maybe make like them getting into random cars, like the script works, where one of the cars stops and picks somebody up, and then it leaves. Just model goes into the car and then disappears and whatever. And just the car keeps going, whatever. Or goes from, it exits a building and then goes into a different building, like maybe a couple blocks away or something like that. Not just in circles walk.
Repeat some voice lines, which is fine, that's understandable. But this isn't the genre-defining game they made it out to be. It's a brilliantly designed world inside a game that feels like it's from 2013. Glitches were abundant, and we're just talking about the PC version here. On Xbox One and PlayStation 4, not only were glitches even more all over the place, but the game ran like piss, and that doesn't run well. Choppy frame rates, low resolution, the game would freeze and crash constantly, and this was the product of a giant marketing campaign pushed by investors and higher-ups who didn't understand how game development worked. They wanted a 2020 release date, which by the time CD Projekt Red started development would have given them less time to finish than The Witcher 3. And this project was so much more advanced with elements they've never worked with before. It just felt like a lot of choices they made didn't add up. Like, why do we have all this customization for our character, but the game is almost exclusively played in the first person and you barely ever see your character? Why push all this money into marketing
in a lot of
showing
games.
a demo of a game that frankly didn't exist yet? Much like other examples given, this demo was basically what the developers were told to shoot for, not what the game was, and no matter how much the developers said they needed more time or this wasn't possible, the marketing pushed Cyberpunk that much more. Like, did they really have to announce, hey, the game is finished, when the developer said, bullshit it is? Cyberpunk 2077 is a good game. It may not be for everybody, but to act like at its core this isn't a well-crafted experience, I think is a bit much. But you can't blame people for thinking that after such a disastrous launch and being lied to constantly. This was a case of a developer who was known for their goodwill and how players adored them, and higher-ups taking advantage of that. It's crazy to me how much these companies feel the need to lie when they know that it'll just come back to bite them in the ass. They take first impressions more seriously than launch impressions sometimes, but is it really worth all the headaches? To go through lawsuits and refunds and to lose consumer trust?
Yeah, I don't.
Impress people at E3
I
with
also don't
something you
understand
know
that.
damn well can't be accomplished? Well,
Fucking
for some
five-head
people
move.
It is. That's why lying is so popular. Fix a problem now, deal with the repercussions later, instead of telling the truth and causing some potential disappointment, but then you don't have to deal with bigger problems a year from now. It's just sometimes marketing takes over projects, and a lot of marketers don't care. Their job is to get people interested.
Not a word
and
about
if it turns
Fallout
out to be
76,
over
eh?
lies, well, that's more publicity
Okay.
for the project. I guarantee you, more people have talked about Cyberpunk and Aliens Colonial Marines and No Man's Sky because they were disasters compared to if they were as good as they were made out to be. And if regardless of if discussion is positive or negative, it's still getting the name out there, which means false advertising for games will never go away. Game studios...
It does get the name out there, but gets it in a bad light. Which means for the future project they actually would lose it. Like Witcher 1 wasn't good. I mean it was alright, but it wasn't great. But if it was much worse than it actually set out to be, or at least much worse than whatever version came out, there would have never been Witcher 2. And then Witcher 3, the same thing. Like when Witcher 2 came out, there were trailers for that properly because the company became bigger after the first success. And Witcher 2 had its problems, but when people were talking about it, they were talking about it mostly in a good light. That's why Witcher 3 was even a bigger success. And after Witcher 3, people were excited for this. And that's why Cyberpunk, I think, it could have been pre-ordered more and like bought on day one or whatever, more than Witcher 3. But then refunds came. And now anybody talks about the Cyberpunk game, most of it in a bad light. If they even fix all of it and add some systems back, make it as revolutionary as it was, it would never be on the same height it could have been when it came out. Without bugs, just a bit polished. Just like, it shouldn't be taking that long. Maybe if you moved it by a year, yeah, people would be angry. People would fucking riot. For some time, but then they'll forget, and when the game comes out, and it's polished, it's bugless. There you go. You get your actually good reviews of the game. Because now, I feel like now, every game should be fucking delayed. And when people start to riot, you'll say that we're fixing bugs. You don't want another Cyberpunk, don't you? And that's it. That's like saving grace now. Whatever.
Are constantly pressured into pushing boundaries, and I feel like they look at what they're currently capable of.
It's actually kind of people's fault what happened to Cyberpunk as well, because by people I mean players, not obviously people's fault. It's not Alien making them, unless I don't know. Because every time a game gets delayed, fucking developers get death threats because of it. It's so fucking stupid. Why would you fucking do that thing? Whatever. So they don't want to delay because of that.
And think it's not good enough. So they pretty things up for reveals and just assume they'll get it working later. But as we can see, that's not the greatest risk to take. I think the lesson we learned here is it's okay to be excited. It's also okay to be skeptical, but maybe wait to make a full decision until something's out in the world and actual people are playing the game rather than snake people. Because liars are everywhere. They might even be staring you in the face.
You?
And this was when I lost credibility.
Okay. You never had one to begin with. I don't know who you are. Anyway, that was maybe rude. I don't know. It was a good video. Brought up a lot of discussions inside myself, so that was interesting. So, if people want, I will react to more Scott The Woz, because there are a lot of videos I haven't seen from him. all of the videos except for false advertising now. But anyway, thank you. Anybody who watched this, I appreciate it a lot. And I actually want to hear kind of your feelings about this kind of stuff in the comments. Never asked for that properly before, but whatever. Thank anybody who watched, I appreciate it a lot, and I hope to see you next time. Goodbye. Have a great life, because one of us has to.